When we are coding, there are three types of structures that we can use in the code. And the first one is sequential, and that's where one line executes after another. So it executes one line, then it does the next line, executes that, then it does the next line. That's sequential, one line after another. Well, another structure that you can have in code is the loop. And that's where you have a instruction or a group of instructions that could be sequential, but that you do those over and over again. So you loop through that instruction or several instructions multiple times and you loop through them. So that's the structure loop. And that's the one we're going to be using today. Now, you've had a previous programming class, and so you already understand this idea of loops. You've learned about them and you've used them in some programming language. And so today what we're going to do is simply go over the loops in JavaScript. So JavaScript has a for loop, and one of the common things that for loops are used to do is to go over an array. So here we have an array cars that has 6 elements, and you can do things individually with them one after another, or you can put that same thing in a loop, right? And so this is what that loop structure looks like. Here we have, it has the keyword for, and then the first part is the initialization, where it sets the looping variable I to 0. And that's where it starts, and then there's a semicolon, and then the middle portion is the condition. So that will keep looping until this condition is false. So as long as it's true, it will continue to loop. And then there's this semicolon, and then there's the increment portion of the for loop. And this identifies how that looping variable will change each time through the loop. And here it's simply incrementing by 1. Now notice here that what is used to end this loop, and what's being used is cars.length. Now remember that arrays have this property length that allows, that you can always get from an array. And as the array changes, as the number of elements in an array changes, then that property length changes as well. So this is a really great thing to use when you're looping through an array. So starting at 0, that we know that indices in an array start at 0, so you can initialize the index to 0, that looping variable 0 that can be used as an index. And then you loop to less than length. Notice it doesn't include length itself, because when you start with index 0 and you have 6 elements, the last index is going to be 5. So the length will be 6, but 6 will never be one of the indices. So going from 0 to less than 6 is what we want to do. And so that's the basic structure of a for loop that loops through the array. And now you can change the array, right? So whatever array you're looping through, it would change here, which would specify the length directly related to that array. And it changes here when you're accessing individual elements of the array. There are a couple of other kinds of for loops that in JavaScript. So let's go down and look at the for in loop. So the for in loop actually loops through multiple properties in an object. So let's look at what that looks like. Notice it still uses the keyword for, but now it has X in person. And X is a variable name that you as the programmer get to choose what it's called. And then person is an object. And again, you can choose which object you're looking for. So in this case, we're looping through a person object. And by the way, we haven't used objects yet. So if this is not clear, that's okay. I just thought it would be worth going over this type of loop so that you know it's available. Sometime when it pops up that you need this type of a loop, you will have at least seen it at some point. So we start this text string at an empty string. And then it says for each X in person. And another way you could put something more meaningful here, like you could say for property in person, just give it a variable name a little bit more meaning. And then and what it'll do is it'll loop through every property. So it will say, so here it's saying concatenate the person, and the first one will be property F name, and the value of that is John. So it'll be John plus space, and that'll be added to text. Then it'll loop to the next property, which is L name, and it will concatenate doe and a space. loop to the next property, which is age, and it will concatenate 25 in space. And you end up with John space, Doe space, 25 space. And it's looped through each individual property in an object. Another for loop is the for of. And again, this begins with the keyword for, and it can loop over any object that is iterable. That means you can iterate over something. And lots of objects have this property that you can iterate over them. And arrays is one of them that has the property you can iterate over it. And what this will do is it will simply iterate over every object in this array. And you don't do the initialization or the end, because the for of does it for you. It begins at the beginning, it goes to each element in the array. And so let's see how this one works. So here we have an array cars and a variable x. And what we're saying is for this variable x, and we can give it whatever name we want. We could call it car, and we could say it for car of cars, like we're just getting one at a time out of this array. Then write whatever's already in x plus break. So write this element, right? When the first time through the loop, it's going to be the first element. So write BMW and then a break tag. Then the next time through the loop, it's going to be the next element. So write Volvo and a break. And the next loop, it's going to be a mini. And so you write mini and a break. And so notice how we've moved through that array one element at a time using the for of loop. Another type of object that you can iterate over is a string. And when you iterate over a string, what you're iterating is one character at a time. So here, if we write, this will say, for the character of text, then we want to write that character plus a break. And so when we do that, what does it do? It writes the capital J first and then a break, then the A and then a break, and then the V and then the break. So any object that you have that you can iterate over, you can use this for of format, right? And that's that type of for loop. So 3 different kinds of for loops that you can use in JavaScript.